Hey, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to continue our discussion of early river valley civilizations, but we're going to turn our attention to Egypt. We'll look at a lot of the same scenarios we did with the video on Mesopotamia, their environmental challenges, pieces of their culture, how they developed their government, so on and so forth. So make sure you're in your interactive notebook and you follow along as we go. All right, we're on page 6 of your interactive notebook, and we're going to go ahead and first talk about the river that the Egyptians decided to settle around, which was the Nile River. It's the second longest river in the world at 4,100 miles. As you can see in the picture to the right, it provided a very fertile set of land, a fertile strip of land. That's what's highlighted in the green areas. So it's very narrow, but again, the Nile River is very long, so it provides a lot of area. The Nile River was pretty consistent, and it flooded yearly. It brings water along with this thick black mud that's very, very fertile, very helpful for farming, and that's called silt. The Nile also needed to be tamed a little bit, so farmers built irrigation systems to help create crops like wheat and barley. And again, they really needed to kind of harness or channel that water because Egypt is in the middle of a desert. So I don't know about you, but when I think about farming and growing crops, I don't really think of, the middle of the desert. I think more like Iowa or Nebraska. So it's very arid, it's very dry there. Lots and lots of water is going to be needed to help harvest crops. Also, the Egyptians worshipped the Nile as a god, and we'll talk more about gods and goddesses in a few slides later. So the Egyptians faced some environmental challenges, much like the ancient Sumerians over in Mesopotamia. So one of the things that they faced was if there was too much or too little rain, or too much or too little flooding. So if they had a light flood year, that's going to cause some problems with their crops. It could lead to starvation. Not good. If the floods were too heavy, that could be the flip side problem, that it might wipe out a lot of property and be very damaging. So we wanted to find kind of that happy medium between the two. And that's again why they worship the Nile as a god, praying to it, be nice to us, be easy on us, don't give us too little, don't give us too much. We want to stay right in the middle. And then thirdly, the deserts that are around them are going to do two things. It's kind of a pro and a con. It isolates them and protects them, but then again, it isolates them. So they're going to have to find ways to trade with others, because if they're just kind of all on their own and can't be self-sufficient, that's going to be a big problem. So the early villages of Egypt are actually ruled by two kingdoms. They become known as Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. We're not going to go through the whole timeline of this. We just want to mention it because in 3000 BCE, King Narmer, sometimes known as Menes, comes in and he actually unites those kingdoms and makes it one giant happy-go-lucky place. Now, I don't know if it's happy-go-lucky, but you get the picture. He resettled it. He creates Memphis as the capital, and he sets up the first Egyptian dynasty. And you can see some of the power that he had. And you can see the uniting process in the crown that he wore. So on the very left-hand side of this picture, you can see this white sort of like bowling pin like crown. That was the crown that was worn by the king in Upper Egypt. And then you see this red one with like this doodaddy thing. I don't know what that's called. That's my very super specific term. That was the crown that was worn by the lower king. Menes goes ahead and merges the two to kind of show again the way in which he united those two kingdoms. The kings in ancient Egypt are also known as pharaohs, and that's usually the Egyptian culture. They call them pharaohs more than kings. That's just what they called them. And they really did feel as though that their kings or pharaohs were gods on earth, and they do worship them as such. The pharaohs are in control of everything: religion, government, the army, the well-being of the citizens, and the kingdom. So lots and lots of responsibility, but also lots and lots of power. The government is actually a theocracy. If you remember from way back when you learned about governments, a theocracy is a government based on religious beings or religious authority. So they are governed by this idea of their religion. And then also pharaohs are so powerful to the ancient Egyptians that they actually are believed to rule even in death. So even if they pass on, they're still considered a king of the nation, even though technically power passes to the new king or the new pharaoh. But they really did feel believe in an afterlife and these kings still ruling there. So that's why these elaborate pyramids and tombs were built in order to house them in their afterlife. And that's why they were, all of their necessities or things that they're going to need in the afterlife were gathered for them in these tombs. So think like precious items, their treasures, all those types of things. So again, as we said, the Egyptian culture was very heavily based on religion, and the ancient Egyptians worshipped over 2,000 gods. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of gods. So obviously they were a polytheistic group, worshiping multiple gods, not just one. Some of their top ones included Re, the god of the sun, Osiris, the god of the dead, and Isis, the goddess of the moon, and she was kind of what every woman wanted to be like. They emulated her. Again, as we said before, the ancient Egyptians believed in life after death, and each person was judged for their deeds at death. If you lived a good life, you had a good afterlife. If you were a good person, if you weren't so good, you might be punished in the afterlife. They also developed mummification, which was basically a process of preventing or delaying the body from decaying. Obviously, as we unearth these mummies, centuries and centuries and centuries later, it's not like, a guy comes out and he's like in pristine condition, but it's like a much different than what, just a person who wasn't mummified, it looks like. And this kind of leads to modern day embalming. We kind of take from those ideas. They also relied heavily on what was known as the Book of the Dead, which included for them their ancient prayers and spells, and ways in which that they would guide souls in the afterlife. It would prepare them for the afterlife. What would they expect? What are they going to do there? And just kind of keeping them safe in the afterlife. Life in the Egyptian society, it did develop social classes, and ironically enough, it was shaped like a pyramid. Go figure. So at the very top, you had the pharaohs, and it went all the way down to your farmers and laborers and your slaves. So like a pyramid, there were very few people at the top, where a pyramid would be narrow and pointy and very small, and those people at the top had a lot of power. And then as you went down the pyramid, you had more people, and they had a little bit less power, a little bit less, a little bit less. People could move into a higher social class, usually through marriage, or by proving their worth or whatever through their merit, good deeds or doing something nice or, performing something for an official, whatever. So their merit could make them move up the ladder. And then women actually have many of the same rights as men. So again, this is another culture, much like Mesopotamia, where women are having similar rights to men. The Egyptians developed the system of writing known as the hieroglyphics. Again, it's a picture-based idea. They're going to use pictures to represent their ideas, and they use papyrus, sheets made from papyrus reeds so that they can write on it. And it's very similar to paper. It's, the ancient day paper. So they're either writing on this, papyrus-like paper or, engraving it in pyramids or walls or whatever. All right, lastly, we want to talk about life in the Egyptian society. They relied heavily on science and technology. They create a few things that we still use today. For example, they invented a calendar with 365 days and 12 months. Hey, I feel like I've heard that somewhere before. So obviously we still use that today. They developed a system of written numbers and kind of an early form of geometry. And then they're engineers and architects. They create these great feats, these giant pyramids, like you can see here, the 3 pyramids at Giza, that are still around centuries later. The fact that they were able to create these and these are still standing really speaks to, how educated and how well they could do these things. Like, it's just, as they say, like, these are the wonders of the world. This is one of the 7 wonders of the world. And then medicine in ancient Egypt was well known worldwide to be very well done and just, word traveled that they were just so awesome at their medicine. So again, this is a brief overview of ancient Egypt. Again, looking at how the culture settled around a river. Make sure you tune in next time when we talk about the Indus River Valley, and be sure to put this in your interactive notebook. Thanks for watching.